we've got Ross Bennett coming on the show. Ross Bennett is, you may not know him by name, but you've seen him.
He's a stand-up comic.
He's been on David Letterman, and he's been on National Broad, and he's great. He's very funny.
Very funny guy.
And we're going to talk to him about, his life as a comedian.
Yeah.
The following is a Tony Lasano podcast, an Opie show on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. This is the Minutia Men Celebrity Interview with Rick and Dave.
Okay, joining us on the phone, Dave. This is a big thrill for us because we're talking about a professional comedian,
major.
And I have to admit to you, Ross, that Dave and I didn't really know much about you before we attended Dobie Maxwell's book release party at Zany's a few years ago. But
right.
Dobie's a good friend of ours. We published his book, and we saw you. You were the headliner that night, and you absolutely killed. It was one of the funniest sets we've ever seen. We have become huge fans of yours. And my first question is, when are you coming back to town?
Meaning Chicago.
Meaning Chicago.
And, of course, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I don't like to be difficult, but these choices are not ultimately up to me.
Yes.
Well, people have to want to put this thing together, and so we'll see. We'll see. But I've always loved being. Whenever I worked in Chicago, I lived there for a number of years. And work at Zany's a lot, but as time goes on, the options for venues shift and change. And but I'd be back there tomorrow. I'm actually going to be there for 1 hour tomorrow.
At O'Hare.
I'm changing planes. I'm on my way to Green Bay, Wisconsin for Saturday night.
Oh.
Wow.
I'm flying through Chicago tomorrow.
So what airline? So we can have fans check you out at Gate 17 or something, right? You'll be doing
holding
a set, right?
big signs up for you?
I will be on United Airlines.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want
Now, when you lived in Chicago, where did you live? What part of town?
Well, I've been there, when I started my career, and I sort of say that in quotes, I first came there in 1978. I had met a Chicago comic at Ted Holum. You ever hear of Ted Holum?
No, I don't think so.
I'm down in Florida after I got out of the Army in the spring of '78, and I meet this guy. I was doing a talent show, and that was the only time I was still trying to pull an act together. And this guy went up, and it was the first comic I ever saw where every joke worked. It wasn't like there was any question in his mind. This guy, I'd never seen a guy with an act like this, where every joke worked. And afterwards, we had a conversation, and he said, "You're funny." He goes, "I have a couple of showcase rooms up in the Chicago area, in the suburbs." He goes, "If you move up, I can put you on stage 10 times a week. I can't pay you, but I'll put you on stage 10 times a week." And I sold the last few things I owned, dropped out of my third college, and I was up there like 2 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
And so I lived out in Lyons, in the suburbs.
Okay.
And there was a club in Lyons called the Comedy Womb, WOMB, the Comedy Womb, where comedians are born.
Oh, clever.
And then there was another club out in Rosemont called the Comedy Cottage. So that was my first experience with Chicago, and I left there in about 9 months later, and I ended up moving in Los Angeles in January of '79. But the second time I was there living was I think it was 93 to 95 or 92 to 94, and I lived right in like near Clark and Diversey and Broadway and all that kind of thing.
Okay. And
I had an apartment there, and during that period of time, I remember Bert Haas at the Zany's. He put me up. He goes, if you know Bert, he goes, Ross, tell you move here, and I'll give you 1 week a month. Oh. I got 3 clubs. I'll put you in each club 4 times. No, because I got 4 clubs. I'll put you in each club 3 times, and you'll make your nut for your month. You'll be guaranteed that 1 week every month. And then I sort of restructured my career at that point out of the Midwest. So that's my experience. And then while I was there, I went to Second City because I'd always, I was a comedy club headliner, but I'd always wanted to learn more about improv. And I spent a year and a half while I was there studying improv at the Second City. And one of my teachers I had Colbert as a teacher.
That's pretty
good.
And
I had Steve Carell. He didn't he didn't have a full class, but he substituted for Colbert once.
How about that? That's around the time that Dave and I were there, too.
But we didn't get those teachers. We got Stumpy McGee or whatever was ours. So you
I remember watching when I went and saw the show at Second City at that time, in like the mid-'90s, and I saw Steve Carell. I said, this guy's going to be a giant star.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Colbert, I didn't see it. He was just a good-looking guy who spoke well, But Carell was obviously a genius.
Oh, yeah.
Absolute genius.
So you had mentioned that you were in Chicago, then you went to L.A., and so you were in the what time frame were you in Los Angeles at that time?
I lived there from 79 to 84.
So you were there in some crazy times. I mean, you must have been able to see some of the great comedians of in history.
My big thing was that when Pryor put together his second concert, the Live on Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
The one that about after he burned himself up and everything.
Right.
He put that together up at the comic strip. And I was there while he did that. And so I got to see him go up, dozens and dozens of times because he basically would go up with nothing. And he would start to build this set based on a very organic process.
Wow.
And I feel, it's in my own little way, I feel that was sort of my, if I went to a school for stand-up, it was that summer.
Wow.
And I kind of, it taught me to always trust that eventually you work on it long enough, you'll figure the joke out. You'll figure it out.
Did you get to meet him? Did you get to meet him or Carlin or any of those?
I shook his hand. I remember, he was, the great thing about comedy and comics is, I worked at the Comedy Cellar for a number of years in New York, and you're sitting at that table there in the back of the cellar, and I can be sitting there, and Jerry Seinfeld could come up, and he's got the same pad of paper that I have. Comics, once you get down to it, it's the same. The numbers might be different in terms of how much money they can generate. But ultimately it's like, how is this funny? I think it's funny. How do I make it funny? And we share that common, that common experience. So most comics can hang out at least for some period of time with other comics, and they have something to say to each other.
Yeah, they do hang out a lot, don't they? And, also, I would describe your set as observational humor. Is that kind of what you would describe it as too?
I'm going to be a jerk. I hate to label myself.
Okay.
Because I don't feel it's up to me to label myself. I got my thing that I do. And but hey, if you think I'm observational, good observation. Excellent observation.
Well, the reason I say that, let me retrench myself a little bit here. The reason I say that is because you're a lot of your stuff is about just day-to-day things that are happening, and when your comedy act is about that, and I used to write a column for a newspaper, and my job was to write a humor column every week, and I would walk around with this little notebook in my back pocket, and if I saw something funny, I would write it down. And I was wondering if that's kind of a similar thing that you have. You like walk around with looking for the humor in the world, or if something just happens to seem funny to you, is that what? How do you?
Well, I teach a class here in the city, and my basic philosophy, my definition is that my job is to go through my life and find things that I think are funny, and then I got to figure out a way to translate it so that a group of people, a room full of people, how I can get them to see the same thing that I saw was funny. and then also to get them to see it all at the same time, to have it in the structure of a joke that makes it so that it can pop at the end, right? Now, sometimes it is an observation, sometimes it's just amusing, it's like something just hits you. That's odd.
Yeah.
Just some sort of a thought, So, I mean, it's, so I think in that regards, I guess there are people who just do characters and that kind of stuff, and it's not so much an observation as it is a character-driven thing. I don't know. Once I start thinking about it, I just want to shoot myself.
That's true. When you break down comedy and you start analyzing it too much, suddenly it's not that funny anymore.
I suck. I'm never going to be funny again. Have you been watching any of the shows on television, like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and Crashing on HBO? I mean, these.
I do not watch Crashing.
Okay.
I have watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and it's marvelous.
Yes, it's one of my favorite. How apropos is, I mean, how is that kind of like the life of a comic? Now, of course, Maisel is back in the 60s, but
well, first it really starts in the late 50s, late 50s, early 60s. I feel when I looked at it, it was I just felt that they got it. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I have all sorts of comics friends who complain about it. Okay, that they don't know her routines aren't funny, blah blah blah, and it's like the thing is, I don't believe a actual stand-up routine would be effective in that show.
No,
it's the stand-up routines there are humorous, but they also drive forward plot points, and they drive forward relationships, and they tell you backstory. There's all sorts of stuff that happens from it, like when she's up there ranting about something sexual or whatever, and then she sees her father out there.
Right.
Okay. Right. The actual joke is, it's all really just a device to get her in this horrible moment of confrontation with her father. Yeah. In terms of him realizing who she is anyway, but I like that part of it. I like now I'm not Jewish, although most people are surprised when they hear that.
You know what? You're an honorary. I have the power of making you an honorary one.
I'm not Jewish, but I particularly living here, and it's such the Jewish culture is such a giant part of stand-up culture. Okay? Yeah. And I've lived in the New York City area for the last 20 years. I was in the Friars Club for 15 years. And the Upper West Side Jewish culture, I never knew what that meant. Okay, but I have all sorts of friends who fit into that culture and have for decades. And then I see that and I get it. It's this whole different world up there. The counterpoint between their culture and Kevin Pollak's culture, the Garment District culture.
Yeah.
Okay. And the funny is, the Garment District has the money, and the ones up on the Upper West Side have the job at Columbia, but no money.
Yeah. Right. Right.
It's just, I just love it. I just love it. I love that they finally, this last season, they got up to the Catskills.
Yeah.
And they just did a wonderful job up there, and then of course Lenny Bruce.
Yes, who they make a character in the show and really believable.
It's first off the actor who plays him.
Oh, it's great.
Won an Emmy for him last fall.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and if you're a comic like of my generation, maybe others, but Lenny Bruce is sort of a mythic character. Okay, that you may have seen. You see. We've seen his appearance on like the Jack Parr show or the right. Steve Allen the Tonight Show. We saw that. You can see a video of that, and you can see Dustin Hoffman doing the movie Lenny.
Right.
But it ends up that movie doesn't do Lenny Bruce justice. Because I spoke to somebody who said that because Dustin Hoffman's not funny.
Right. It's a kind of a key ingredient.
He's not funny. Well, all he is Jewish, and the truth is, right. He looks Jewish. Dustin Hoffman looks like just an uber Jewish person, whereas Lenny Bruce was cute Jewish.
Yeah, he could have passed for Italian.
Dustin Hoffman is like molester Jewish, okay? but Lenny Bruce is like, smooth and charming. And
molester. Right, you got the Orthodox, you got the conservatives, and you got the molester Jews.
That's right. So, so the few things that I've actually found out about him is that Marvelous Mrs. Maisel portrayal. I think that they get it.
Yeah.
No,
I think that they get it. It all comes down to when she bails him out of prison in the first episode, bails him out of jail in the first episode, and he's leaving the police station, and she says something to him. She goes, "Well, why do you do it?" or whatever, and he looks back and he kind of throws his shoulders up, puts his hands up, and has a cute little smile on his face. And he walks out. And
right.
I think what gets lost because of how this guy died and how he became obsessed with the speech thing and everything was he was just a really funny guy.
Yeah.
And he was quirky and he was obviously extremely charming because you can't be a star. You can't attract an audience, unless you're charming. And he was a charming guy. Okay.
Well, let's talk about your big moment on television when you were on Late Night with David Letterman. So we're talking, 6-7 years ago, something like that?
Thanks. Yes, It was 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
I can't believe it, but it was.
I've seen the set.
Oh, it's great.
Tell us the whole story, because I know every comic wants that slot, and you got it. And what happened to you before and after, and what? Just tell us the whole story.
First off, I've been trying to get on a late night talk show, either the Tonight Show or eventually or Letterman, ever since like 1982.
Right.
Okay, 1980, 81. I remember auditioning for Jim McCauley, who was the talent coordinator at the Tonight Show with starring Johnny Carson. And I did a set. When I got off stage, he wasn't there. And I was auditioning for him. And I chased him out into the parking lot, and he smelled of, booze and bourbon. Oh, and I said, "Well, what'd you think?" And he goes, and it's sort of like between bourbon belches. He goes, I didn't see anything that I thought was funny.
Oh, boy.
And then there's a pause, and then he goes, and I definitely didn't see anything that Johnny would think was funny.
Wow.
And of course, I always feel that that's the point when my drinking crossed the line into alcoholism. Okay? But it took me years and years and years to understand it, because, the thing is, I always just go up and get laughs.
Yeah.
I could always go up and just get really big laughs, And I remember when I first got to L.A., I auditioned for Mitzi Shore at the Comedy Store, and I just destroyed. Absolutely destroyed, to the point that afterwards, one of the talent court, the guy who introduced me, I think it was Robert Aguayo, he said, "Well, if you're going to talk to her, now's the time," because literally the audience is still. I'm actually I'm standing next to her at her booth in the back. Okay, the audience is still applauding. This is a packed audience at the original room. And by the way, that room was a hot room. If you killed there, it was unbelievable what would happen. Just the way the balloon shook. They're literally still applauding. She waves me down with her hand, and she says, "Don't let any of that fool you. You're not funny."
Wow.
Hello.
Crap.
And these were, and that was what I was up against. Okay. And I didn't know how to handle the idea that I killed, and yet she didn't think I was funny. Okay. And I remember a number of years later, I was doing a comedy competition, and there was a guy out of Chicago who had the best set of his life, and he came in 6th.
Yeah.
And he had to leave. He'd never had response like that before, and he came in 6th, and he had to leave. Okay. He couldn't handle that.
Yeah.
Okay. So because when we're on stage and we're killed, it's like when you're having sex. It's just you and her, and she's screaming yes, yes, and you're screaming yes, yes, And at that moment, you're a god.
Yeah. That's where I get my most laughs, to be honest.
I'll have to take your word for
at
that.
That moment, you're an absolute god. You're like Joe Buck from Midnight Cowboy. You think because some girl in the back of a car thought, was happy with you, that you belong in New York City as a call boy. Okay. So anyway, I tried to get off and on for years. I remember Carson's last show crying because I knew that meant that I could never do it.
Yeah.
I should have probably realized it would have been a couple of years before that. It would have been a process.
When the guy said, Johnny will never find you funny.
The day before, yeah. And then, so I come to New York. I move around a lot, but I came to New York in around 2000, and I'd always had a good act, but I came up with the idea that I needed to put together an act. I needed to find my material that was showcase material for like the clubs in New York City, okay, as opposed to just comedy clubs around the country.
Right.
And I started to allow my material to kind of. I started to look into my material. Where's the jokes? Where are the really strong lines? Okay, and my act sort of started to develop around that. And I did not. What happens is I auditioned for the guy who was the coordinator there, and he didn't think I was right for the show. Okay, and I just got tired of rejection, so I just let it go. I started doing cruises for a long time, and what happens is I lose my cruise agent, so I don't work at cruises for a year and a half, okay? And I'm in the clubs in the city. This is like 2010, 11, 12, right around there. And the guy who had said he wasn't right for the show got fired, okay? He was the talent coordinator for the Late Show with David Letterman. And they replaced him with a triumvirate, 3 young people, okay? And they went out and saw all the acts in the city that they had heard about or the people recommended, and their deal was that all 3 of them had to want them on the show in order for them to have a chance to be on the show. And I was offered a showcase at the comic strip by Richie Tinkin, who's the owner of the place, and I actually turned him down. I said, I just don't want to be rejected again. And I talked to my son that night, and he goes, "You should really do it." So I did it. So I called him up. I did it. I put together my set and did all my killer material, and I went up and I just knocked it out of the park because I was really good in that room. And it was all material that I thought would be good on television. It was all material that I liked, I thought would be good on television. And Richie told me an hour later, he goes, there were 2 people they were interested in. And it was me and Colin Jost, the guy who was the SNL guy. And so that is probably June of 2012. And then they put me on another showcase, knocked it out of the park again. It was like me, and it was like, I was like 58. I was 57. And it was me and like a bunch of people in their 20s and 30s, okay? And they had no idea what they were doing. They were no idea. It was like 2D and 3D. It was like black and white and Technicolor, okay? And so they say they want me on the show, and we put together a set over the next couple of months. And so now it's like about August of 2012, and I got the set. Now we're just waiting for the time to go up.
Wow.
And it took another 6 months to find a slot. They called me up with a slot, and it was a week that I'd gotten back on cruise ships. And it was a week that I was going to be on a cruise ship. I could have that week or the following week, okay? And I could take the first week they offered and cancel the cruise, or if I do the cruise, I can come back and do it the next week when I get back from the cruise. And in my mind, I knew that I had to take the second week. That if I was to allow myself to cancel $3,000 of work, it would be giving the show. It'd be just. It's too needy. It was just too needy.
Gotcha.
There's nothing worse when you're needy. It just felt too needy. Okay. And so between that Wednesday, the Thursday that I didn't do it, and the one I did, that week I was just praying every night that he didn't die of a heart attack,
or the ship doesn't sink, right?
He didn't say some horrible racist, some horribly racist, offensive thing on the air. They have some sort of a horrible thing happen. No assassin, nothing. And because you have to live with that for the rest of my life. I could have.
Yeah, right.
I'd be drunk in a bar with a cigarette. I was almost. So that's the story of how I got on and everything.
That's a great story.
Yeah, how many times have you watched on YouTube? Because I think I've watched it like 30 times. Do you watch yourself on YouTube? I mean, do you generally no. These days, what I've done is I've scrubbed it. I've scrubbed the tube to do all the material that I do and basically I want to showcase the material that I'm doing when people hire me for corporate events and churches and
because you do a clean act,
public events. The bulk of my act and my jokes were always clean, but I always had some stuff because I'm in a club that I appealed to your lesser angels.
Well, I highly recommend people check out the stuff that you have up there on YouTube. We played a clip earlier about colonoscopies, just to tease your appearance.
Which is a great
something that Dave and I relate to totally. We're about the same age as you.
Did you pull it off the dry bar?
I don't know what.
Where did we get that?
I don't know.
Dave brought it in, so I'm not sure.
All right. Well, here's the thing: you go on YouTube and you put in Ross Bennett dry bar.
Okay.
Okay, and you know about dry bar comedy?
No.
What's up with you guys? Dry bar comedy is it's online out of Utah, and it's Netflix for clean comedy.
Oh, okay.
And they have over 50 or between 50 and 100 comics who have produced full 45-minute like Netflix specials, but it's all clean comedy.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So they have a Facebook page, a dry bar. You can get the clips on YouTube. You just click in right now, Ross Bennett YouTube. Ross Bennett dry bar. You'll see it. And then they also have a website where you can get the full specials. Okay.
Oh, well, there you go.
And we're talking about, I've got my videos on there have like 3-4 million hits.
Wow. Well, there you go.
And some people have things of like 50, 100 million hits. There's some people when they connect, they really connect, But that's if you want to see my stuff, they got 4 chunks out of my 45-minute thing up there that I think really show me well. The best. I'm very proud of those.
Well, we appreciate you coming on today to do this interview. It's always fun talking to you, and we're fans. And we wish you the best in your career.
Yeah. And if you're in
I love what I do, and I'm glad that I'm able to make people laugh and have a good time.
And if people are listening and you're in the United Terminal tomorrow from 7 to 7:30 or something, you can catch
right.
Hold a sign up.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Thanks, buddy, and safe travels, and thanks a lot.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. Well, thanks so much.
That was great.
Ross.
I love the David Letterman story and just...
You take a deep dive into comedy, Well, these guys, you see them on stage, and it looks like they're just going up there and being funny, right. But there is so much thought and so much...
he just basically said it took him a lifetime to do a 40-minute set, and no, he's a great guy. And if you're in Green Bay...
That's right, or at the airport. So a special thanks to our executive producer, Tony Lasana with opishows.com. Opie is hippo backwards, OPPIH shows.com. We're distributed by Ed Silla with Radio Misfits. Great Talk Radio isn't dead. It just moved to a better place, radiomisfits.com. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of
Minutia Man.
The preceding was a presentation of Opie Productions. Find our other great shows wherever you find podcasts, including opishows.com. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of Opie Productions.
Tony, can you shut up?